6:04, so I'm Molly Sexton-Reed, and I'm the board chair here at Northwestern, so I'm going to...
Hey!
That's right. If I keep talking, eventually it'll happen.
But they're missing the intro.
Oh, I know, yes. Anyway, I will, as board chair here, officially call this meeting to order at 6:04 and introduce to you Jonathan Costa, who's here to do his presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Costa. I am the Director of School and Program Services at the Education Connection. Our main mission is to help our local boards be as successful as they can in the carrying out of their own individual missions. And it's in that role that I'm here tonight and pleased to be with you. I want to make it very clear that I did not write Public Act 12-1816. I am in no way responsible for any of this legislation. I am here as a reporter and as a resource, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have about it. I've had the good fortune to be a public educator in Connecticut for most of the lifespan of the sort of the context I'm going to give you here tonight. Taught in public school in Region 1, taught in private school, did a couple years in private industry. I'm a 6-year Board of Education survivor, so I've sat in your seats as well. So I bring all those things to this context. I've been in my current position at the Education Connection for the last, I'm starting my 5th year. So I've been part of this and part of this process. What I'm going to try to do is give you sort of a 10,000-foot view and then about 20 minutes at the 20-foot view. And my job is to give you a sense of what it is, what it means to your districts, and then to respond to any questions that you have. I know the 7 board has a regular business meeting after this, so if at the end of that first part, if they want to adjourn and go have their meeting, if the elementary boards want to stick around, you want to talk some more, I mean, I'm here for the duration. As long as you want to be here, I can be here as well. I'm assuming that basically this is our goal as public school servants. We want to try to get every student ready for learning life and work beyond school for the 21st century. I tell you this because what you will find in some of this work is that there's going to be an increasing amount of pressure on all of you to focus on a small part of what this is. And I think it is going to be inherent, a very challenging board responsibility over the next 5 to 10 years to remind ourselves that there is more of an answer to this than just what's covered in this legislation. I think that's going to be a theme that I'm going to come back to, but I just put that up there to put you in the right frame of mind. I also spend some time tonight talking about the primary mechanisms through which public schools work. And I think if you're going to shift your mission, shift your focus, try to improve performance, it inevitably is going to be through one of these mechanisms in your school or in your district. Either through actions that you take at the board and superintendent level, through the goals for learning that you set for your children, the way teachers teach and interact with them, the way you measure it and are held accountable for it, the way you prepare materials and communicate to your communities, the way you budget, the way you provide professional support to the people that work in your district, and the way you evaluate them and give people and report on their performance. And I can tell you that the 2 main pieces of legislation or policy we're going to look at tonight have a dramatic impact on all 8 of those things. And so I give you that frame of reference to start because in the end, when I start talking about the cumulative weight of this, I'm going to come back to this graphic and overlay the bullet points from the legislation on top of it. So mission and focus is critical. The gears that grind through public school administration and teaching and learning are the second, and away we go. I give you this just as a context because if you look at public ed over the last 30 years, you see this very discernible sort of evolutionary shift in the way those that regulate public schools are behaving. And I went to school and was trained as a teacher in this pre-1986 era. And I use 1986 as a benchmark. I know at least one person in the room knows exactly what happened in 1986. Do you remember that law? The Enhancement Act? That, you know, when I started teaching, I still have that first contract on the wall in my office, and it's got 4 figures, baby, 4 figures. That's when we paid people pretty much nothing to work in public schools. But prior to the Enhancement Act, basically all goals for learning, all our curriculum, etc., was really locally determined. You decided that at the local level. The primary job of a high school in this environment was to rank and sort kids out. Who's going to college? Who's going to go into the general economy? For accountability, really, it was no news is good news. As long as there were no newspaper stories or massive complaints at meetings, as long as parents felt like their kids were being taken care of and safe, everybody was happy. Really, teacher prep consisted of graduation. I mean, I taught with teachers who were hired in the Vietnam era on a telephone interview, just, can you do it, come on in. I mean, that was the extent of teacher prep. Most curricula were directly tied to textbook table of contents. That's what framed our thinking. Testing was about pencils and paper. We grouped and labeled children according to what we felt their potential was, from special education to varying abilities. I mean, I was in humanities in Region 1, and we all know what that meant. These were the fast-track college kids. My first teaching job, I taught remedial social studies for grade 9. We all knew who those kids were, and that's the way we did things. And really, instruction was teacher dependent. You got the kind of instruction that the teacher you had wanted to give you. And coming in, most kids were ready to start kindergarten, just as a general rule. And to leave, you needed a 60. You needed to pass your classes with a 60 average, and you could get out. And that was public ed, really, for the first 100 years. And it started to change, really peaking in NCLB, where we have state-by-state standards. So throughout the 90s, we have states determining or setting standards for their districts. Of course, we said always it was voluntary, but then the CMT and the CAP come in, start testing on those standards. So yeah, you could voluntarily ignore it at your own testing peril. We stopped ranking and sorting. In fact, it is the state policy in Connecticut that if you are going to rank and sort kids, you have to provide a written rationale supported by research for why you're going to do it, which is not easy to do because there is no research to support it, so you get where you get. And we test everybody now. Remember, when I was in high school, kids who wanted to go to college took the SAT. You didn't want to go to college, you didn't have to take a test. Some kids took the ASVAB test, they wanted to go to the military, but we tested kids who wanted to be tested. Today, we test everybody. No Child Left Behind, label failing schools. So we have these standards, we have these tests. If you're not meeting a standard, we are going to tell the public that your school is not meeting that standard. We have advanced certification programs now in the state of Connecticut. We have dramatically stratified certifications. Think of a role in a school and there is a certification for it, and if you don't have that certification, you can't do that job. We had the BEST program. We have one of the original founding mothers of BEST with us right here in the room. That was beginning educator support, and we supported teachers when we brought them into the program. Curriculum was based on those state standards and frameworks. We expanded the testing regimen to include performance tasks in science, so it wasn't just paper and pencil tests anymore. And in a big shift, we went completely away from grouping, but we took subgroups of children with specific labels, again, special education, free and reduced lunch, English as a second language learner. And if your district had more than 40 of those students, we measured their performance separately and reported on it separately. So if they were significantly behind the general population, you would be on a list for failing to educate them appropriately. Instruction became more standards aligned, so there were certain behaviors that we knew we needed to get kids up to a certain level of performance based on the standards that we had, and we started observing teachers based on their ability to do that, and really we saw a growing need for preschool programs as fewer and fewer kids were ready to start K at an academic level, and we see skill demonstrations as part of the requirement to get out. So it's not enough just to pass your class. You also have to be able to write to a certain level or solve a problem to a certain level. You have to be able to perform to a certain level to graduate. And this regime really was the 2000 to 11 system. And if you notice, the expectations are higher, the standards are higher, the accountability is higher. But if you think about those gears that I showed you a couple minutes ago about the way we do things, the way we do school still is pretty much the way we always did school. So you've got this system that's in place, and we've layered this in a much higher level of expectation on top of it. Not to mention mandates, administrative requirements, just almost innumerable reports, administration on top of it. And that was the state of being until just this past year. And now, there's a reason why these colors deepen as we go across, because this latest round of legislation has deepened our commitment to everything that you see started in this column. And my job tonight is to sort of show you how these changes are an extension of this and talk about the implications for you as educators in Connecticut. First of all, we have made a transition in Connecticut from state-by-state determined standards to Common Core state standards. These are the Common Core state standards. 46 states have signed up voluntarily to adopt those standards. Connecticut did so in 2010. Okay? They are not a product of the federal government. They are a product of an initiative begun by the Governors Association. States voluntarily joined in. Working groups were formed by the participating states. They commissioned the writing of the standards. As I said, 46 states have adopted them currently. They cover the language arts, reading and writing, and math. In a year or two, a science set is expected as well. And the State Board of Education Connecticut adopted that in 2010. So since July of 2010, the Common Core state standards in language arts and math, in fact, are Connecticut's state standards. The biggest change between our previous state standards and these are the depth of knowledge required to pass them, to be at standard. So most good estimates, and this is important, we're going to talk about this when we get to testing, are that if your district is performing at a level right now, if you immediately began testing on these versus the CAP CMT, which are still tied to our state standards, you can expect about a 30% drop in proficiency from where you are right now. So if you've got 90% of your kids at standard, if you didn't do anything different to get ready for these, your next test you'll be at about 60%, because they are more rigorous, they are fewer in number, although not much fewer, and much deeper. Connecticut's previous approach to standards was we're going to do a little bit of everything every year and build on everything every year. The Common Core is we have a set of foundational skills, we're going to teach you them, and then we're going to move on to the skills that follow that. So depth of understanding in a skill area, teach it, master it, move on to the next block. As a measurement for those tests, for those standards. Connecticut has committed to be part of what is called the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, and we've also committed to issuing IPIs, Individual Performance Index, which essentially is a rating for each student as a measurement of how they compare to a mastery level of these standards. So the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortia will begin testing in Connecticut in the 2014-2015 school year. So in March of 2015, there will be no mastery test in Connecticut. There will be no CAPT test in Connecticut. There will be a Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium test. And for the vast majority of students, that test will be administered digitally, online, through technology. The reason for this is because the test is designed to be an adaptive test. So no student gets the same test. Every student answers a question. The computer judges the level of response and then queues up the next question based on how you answered the first one. And through this process, the assessment is designed to really isolate where each individual student learner is and give you a much better sense of the level of learning in any classroom, with any student, and in any building. Right now, with the CMT, if I'm a 6th grade student, for example, and I'm reading at a 9th grade level or a 10th grade level, and I go into the language arts portion and get every question right, all they know is that I got every question right. In this test, those questions will keep getting harder until the level of maximum achievement of that student at that time is reached. So they will not only know whether they knew the 6th grade question, but they'll know whether they knew the 7th, 8th, or beyond. So you'll know exactly where kids are. And on the other side, if I'm a 6th grader and I'm reading at a 3rd grade level, or I just moved to the country 3 months ago and I don't understand the language, the test is going to adjust down till I can answer the question. So I can fix the low level of performance as well. And this is going to be very interesting because it'll give us much better data, which is good, and that's going to lead to those IPIs, those Individual Performance Index scores. But it's also going to do something very interesting culturally in your buildings, which you need to be ready for. Right now, you've got kids in your schools who have never been challenged by a test question item before. And you've got kids in your building who hate tests because they have never gotten one right. Neither one of those things should happen in this regime. Kids who have always had it easy are going to be challenged. And kids who have never been able to do anything are going to be able to do something. So it's a much, it's a much more fair, I think, in some ways, assessment. Right now, the thinking is that in 2015-2016, tablet will be required so that the testers can capture student work. You can take the stylus right on the tablet. So testing, essentially, in the next 3 years will become a digital exercise in Connecticut. That has some implications for kids that never have access to computers, never have access to technology. There's absolutely, I believe, a danger or a risk that kids who don't know how to manipulate these tools will have that lack of a skill impact their test scores. And, I've been asked, well, aren't they concerned about that? Won't they factor that? Right now, it doesn't matter how well you are proficient in the English language. I mean, how long after you arrive do you have to take the test? I mean, there's almost no provision to get out of the test. So they don't even count English language proficiency right now as a barrier to taking the test. Why would they count technology proficiency as a barrier to take it? So everyone's going to take the test. And the more they're ready for it, the better off they're going to be. These assessments are absolutely intended to impact instruction. We always, oh, you're teaching to the test, that's a bad thing. Yeah, it's a bad thing if it's a bad test. If you're teaching to a meaningless test, then teaching to the test is detrimental to the learner. If you have a high standard test that seeks to force kids to be problem solvers, seeks them to think creatively, forces them to solve problems, then teach the test all you want. Those are skills that you need anyway. So this is absolutely intended to drive instruction. And they are upfront about that. They are clear about it. That's part of the deal of being part of the Smarter Balance. You can ask a question anytime, by the way, if you have one. The results of these tests, right now in Connecticut, the way you get credit as it relates to the old NCLB requirements was the movement that got you credit was going from below proficient to proficient. So that's how you scored credit. In this regime, you'll be able to score credit by advancing through any one of these levels. So the argument is, because this is better data, smarter data, we'll be able to reward growth at any level in a way that we weren't with the old tests. The only thing we're not rewarding is going above goal. So you are not going to get credit for moving kids from goal to proficient.
No,
you will
advanced.
get, excuse me?
Advanced. Goal to
I'm sorry, from goal to advanced. But you will get credit for moving them from any other level up. And basically, I show you this because at every level there will be indicators, there are indexes that you're going to be given. So you have the individual performance indicator that students get, you get a school performance indicator that schools get, and a district performance indicator that districts get. And it's all based on this framework. If you have a student who is below basic, they get nothing. If they are at basic, they are counted as 0.33, at proficient 0.67, at goal 1. And those numbers are what is averaged to give you the school performance index. All your school performance indexes are averaged essentially to get you your district performance index.
Jonathan, what's the
Yes.
rationale for not assigning any numerical value to advanced? Any different
Yep.
numerical value?
That comes based, the reason much of this happened, I'm going to answer your question in a second, Philip. The reason much of this happened is that our State Department of Ed had to file an application with the federal government to get out of the sanctions associated with No Child Left Behind. Under the law that is currently on the books, because Congress cannot get together to do anything, in 2014, if you didn't have 100% of your students at or above goal, you were going to be a failing school. That is still the law of the land. In order to be out from under those penalties, we had to convince the federal government that we had an accountability system that supplanted. One of our historic challenges in Connecticut has been the gap between highest performing and lowest performing learners. And in the federal application for the waiver, our suggestion or our proposal was in fact to give that a weight as well. And their response was they believed that would unmask our lack of ability to serve the lowest performing learners. That it would weight it and make it look better than it was. So basically what they're saying is, this is my subtext. Anyone can move someone from goal to advanced. The real work is getting kids from below basic to proficient. So we're going to reward that. Pat yourself on the back for the other, but that's not going to be part of your system. So we were basically told that if you keep that in there, you're not going to get your waiver.
But isn't that really contrary to the way these Smarter Balances are created?
Well, the response I think would be, you're still going to know that. You can still have that discussion on a board level. You're going to have all that data. It's just not going to be part of your SPI. So you could sit down and say, this year we moved 40% of our people to goal to proficient. And as a local community, you can all celebrate that as progress. But it won't move your school indicator. So as long as you are all clear on what goes into it, it's up to you. Every kid is part of the rating. For those kids who are not capable or on the list to take the Smarter Balance, the skills checklist children with cognitive disabilities, they still have their own assessment, and they are scored, and they will play into your school ranking as well. So this is just an example of how those performance indexes are calculated. And basically, they're all averaged on a factor of 100 because all the rankings are based on 100. And that's how you're going to get your individual index scores, your school index scores, and your district index scores. So, because we're no longer labeling failing schools, what we're going to do instead is basically rank everything. Every district is going to have a ranking. Every school is going to have a ranking. And every teacher is going to have a ranking. We'll get to that in a minute. And, you know, this does have some implications for you, because there are, how many elementary schools represented in the room? Total? 4? Okay. 6? Okay, so 6 elementaries. At some point in time, this lovely lady is going to write a story, and your school rankings are going to be in there. And everyone will know in Region 7 which elementary school has a better ranking than all the others. It's going to happen. The state is never going to promote that data that way. The state will never suggest that it's used that way, but all of those rankings are in the public domain, and they will come out that way.
And every teacher.
The teacher rankings are going to be in an accumulative possible. I don't think you're going to be able to, well, you know, it's going to be interesting. I believe
Mrs. McGillivetti
yep,
did well.
there are two ways. The rankings of teachers are going to happen in 2 ways. There's one set of data that's around the new teacher evaluation system. I'll talk to that in a minute. The other provision is K-3 reading is a huge component of this legislation. And every K-3 teacher, every special education teacher, and every reading consultant is going to have to take an annual exam related to their understanding of teaching reading.
If you have a reading consultant, because you don't have control of the financial resources, provide that kind of service to meet these wonderful goals.
There you go. Those,
I was just wondering about it.
it's okay. Those results must be reported to the state board. I don't know how you can keep those results from becoming public. If you are tasked with being a reading specialist or a special education teacher, you must pass that test to keep your certification. If you are an administrator of a school, you have to take that test every year as well. You don't have to pass it to keep your license, but you've got to take it. So it's going to be public. So at every level, we are going to use public shame as a motivating tool. Whether you believe that's an effective tool or not, I leave that to your philosophical debate, but it will be present.
The IPI
Yes,
for
sir.
the students, I assume that it's not going to be in public.
That is correct. That is not going to be in the public domain. But if you are collecting, I believe that at some level, there will be litigation around the public ranking of teachers. That inevitably, I believe the CEA and the NEA will lose. Because basically, they did it in Los Angeles already. It's happened in Los Angeles. They sued and they lost. You are a public employee receiving money from taxpayers and you've gotten a job evaluation, the aggregate at least is going to be public. I think there will be litigation about whether it's fair or legal for you to make my personal one public, but I would not bet on your ability to keep those things private.
There are a lot of teachers in the building. Some are classroom teachers and others are supportive.
Does your job require a certification?
Yes,
You will get a rating.
I'm a PE teacher.
You're going to get a rating. I'll tell you, I'll explain in a second.
Okay.
You're going to get a rating. Yes, sir.
A couple slides back, you were talking about advancing students.
Yes.
If you're just going to come out with a initial rank, you're not really measuring improvement, you're just, that's just
Well,
an end, so this is really a function
Sure.
of time.
Hang on one second. I'll get to a little bit about the growth story in a second.
Oh,
Okay?
I assume the administrators will be ranked also.
That's correct.
So,
Yes, that's correct.
Where does the,
how about yours
under No Child Left Behind,
Yes.
there was a magic number of 40 students.
Yes.
Under the new law, it's 20.
That's
so
correct.
if you have less than 20,
More than 20.
but if,
Oh, if you have less than 20,
yeah,
you don't
I'm a
get
third
counted
grade
as a
teacher with
subgroup.
18 kids in my class.
No.
No, it's just subgroup measurement, George.
Okay.
So I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So here's the performance index stuff, and how can you drive up the SPI? Like I said before, in the old days, the only way you could drive it up was clearing kids over the hurdle from basic to proficient. You will be able to drive up your performance by raising kids through each of those levels, but basically here's the growth thing. So the magic number in the waiver for a school performance index is 88. And what's that?
Where'd that come from?
It is
Why 80, why not 87?
Because-
B plus.
88 essentially is what it looks like statistically if you've got, given the scoring system, 70% of your kids at goal or higher. So basically what they tried to do was say, nobody believed, although we would never say it publicly, nobody believed 100% in 10 years was realistic. So what they tried to do was create a challenging but reasonable goal. So 70% of all kids at above or higher by 2018. So to get there, you need to have an SPI of 88. So what they do then is they take whatever your score is right now, based on the last 3 years of CMT data. If it's lower than 88, take that and basically divide it by 6 years, because that's the distance between now and 2018, and that's your target growth per year. Okay? The maximum growth per year is 3. So if you're more than 18 points below 88 right now, you are not going to be held, you're not going to be punished for not getting to 88 in 6 years, because you're still meeting an annual growth target, okay? So there is some provision for that. My guess is that the schools in this room, nobody is more than 18 points away from 88. In fact, probably most of you are near at 88, around there already. So that's the way it works. Now, you are going to have the data that you need. Let's say you wanted to locally say, all right, our SPI via the state formula is 88. I'm going to, in addition to that, report to you the percentages of kids that we moved from goal to proficient, or from goal to exemplary. So you could have a local data report and discussion about your progress beyond 88, but you'll have it locally. You're not going to get that report from the state because they don't care. They don't report it that way.
You could also then report on advanced levels as well.
That's what I meant. I'm getting the two things mixed up.
Oh,
I
okay,
meant from
okay.
goal to advanced.
Okay.
Yeah, Judy corrected me before, and I made the same mistake again. So you can have that goal to advanced discussion, but it is not going to show up in your SPI. You have to have that discussion locally.
Jonathan, I'm a little confused here, because as I understand from the earlier part of your discussion, with the Common Core assessments
Yep.
allegedly kicking in 2015,
Yep.
and the fact that they're going to be much more rigorous,
Yep.
to the point where you stated that there's an expectation that you might have a 30% drop
Yes.
in whatever your
Yes.
ranking. How does that fit into this nice-looking little projectile?
Well, the way it fits in is that in 3 years, this projectile is going to look a lot different. Now, they are not going to, yeah, exactly, exactly.
It's going to be
So,
a mountain.
these numbers are going to, most likely go like this. And you're going to start over. Because unless you started 2 or 3 years ago, like when they were published, and it's not reading the standards that's the challenge. They're 50 pages. You can read them tonight. It's how do you teach differently to help kids be able to perform the stuff that's in here. The best example I can give you is math. So, and it's true in writing too. We have in Connecticut developed teaching habits around routinized testing. So the classic example that we were talking about on Monday, I was in a meeting talking about this stuff, was, and everyone know the finger trick around nines? How to do the 9, right? So we teach kids the trick to get the answer, not what the hell connection is this to what the math actually is. Because if I take away your ability to use your fingers to do your 9 times tables, and I'm giving you a problem that's got nothing to do with computation, but the concept, this thing doesn't help you at all. So we have, and we've done the same thing around writing, 5-paragraph essay, you got the beginning, middle, end. We have all kinds of tricks to create responses to predictable questions. When you get non-predictable questions. So, given these 3 articles, to defend pick a position based on these 3 articles and use the writing format or convention that works best for your message. None of the formulas help you. You've got to think about that. So, it's not, many of the states that got Race to the Top money to do Common Core work. New York State, for example, they are spending $12 million to create K-12 curricula created by professionals. Math, language arts. By law, it must be public and freely shared. You will be able to take the best curricula the state has to offer and stick it in place in your district, no problem. The problem is, if you don't know how to teach that way, what are you going to do? Professional development, peer support. The state is working very hard to align what I'm going to describe to you in teacher evaluation with the teaching behaviors that must be present to deliver this effectively. This is going to be the biggest professional challenge that most of your teachers have ever faced. The school grades will come in 5 flavors. Excelling, that's you met all state targets, that's your 88 and higher, and maintaining, and everybody's doing great. You have progressing, you're meeting your annual targets, so even if you're below 88 but you're hitting those growth targets along the way, you'll be progressing. Transition, the transition school. You're below 88, you're not quite meeting your growth targets. A transition school must submit an improvement plan. There's not close monitoring, but you've got to recognize that you're in this category. You don't want to be below the line. These people are eligible, woohoo, I'm eligible for being a turnaround review school. And if you're a turnaround school for long enough, basically they are going to take you over. They will disband you. They will take over the board. They will replace the superintendent. They'll reconstitute the staff. There is language in the statute that basically allows them to run those schools.
And they is the state board.
They're
They're
designate, the commissioners designate, correct.
But not the state board?
The state board is ultimately the authority, but they aren't, the state board's designee and the commissioner's appointee are the people who are going to be running the district.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So in that case, a turnaround school?
Yep.
I mean, the state would come in, disband the elected folks?
Yes.
On the Board of Ed?
Correct.
And take over the school?
Correct. But you gotta be,
With a, with
Yeah,
a,
there are-
with a checkbook. I'm sure they have a checkbook.
they do have a checkbook, actually.
Yeah, that's
They
right.
do have a checkbook.
They're
No,
higher
no,
allowance.
there is additional money.
Well, it's still taxpayer money.
Yeah, yes, but it's applied, I mean, the schools that are in this category, we were involved in an audit of those schools. All I can tell you is no one who visits a school like that can for a minute believe that this is a misguided action. I mean, these are schools that are essentially sentencing children to a life of despair. They have no shot. And the conditions that lead a school to become that way are very complex, have many driving factors. But if you had a chance to walk through Battelle, walk through Antolini, walk through, Colebrook, and you go and you walk through a turnaround school, you'll go home and be very grateful for the fact that you live in the zip code that you do. These are very difficult places to try to educate children. And the data, this isn't like, oh, you were excelling and now you're turnaround. You're talking about 20, 30 years of excruciatingly dismal performance. And I think, one of the challenges of this legislation is and this is a personal belief, I think there's about 20% of the schools in our state desperately need an intervention like this. But it is politically untenable to pass a law that you apply to 20% of your schools. So we have a system designed to intervene on those children's behalf that we are all going to follow. And I don't think anyone from the State Department would say that, because I think, if you want to be if you want to be direct about it, there are some adults in every school who have some performance issues. There is no place for anybody to hide in this structure. If you are not pulling your weight, the data will show you up eventually. So one of the key provisions of this new process, again, remember, get a degree, certifications, and BEST. Now we have certifications still. BEST has been replaced by TEAM, which is a new teacher induction program that started 2 years ago. And now we have SEED, which is Connecticut's System for Education Evaluation and Development. And basically, starting a year from now, every teacher and administrator in your district will get a rating, and I'll tell you what those ratings are in a minute, based on 50% evidence collected on practice outcomes. This means observations of you doing your job, the way you practice your craft, and 50% based on student performance outcomes. Remember that IPI, that SPI? it's going to feed into the outcome portion of this model. 45% state tests or student assessment of some kind. So of that 45%, 22.5% must be a standardized assessment. So if you're an elementary teacher, if you're a grade 11 teacher, that is going to be a Smarter Balance assessment number, I guarantee it. The other 22.5%, some reliable measure of student performance. That can be determined by the teacher working with their administrator, but there are criteria for what qualifies, and that must be in the process. 5%, whole school student learning indicator. So that's tailor-made for the SPI, the School Performance Index. So every teacher is going to have some skin in that game. If the school goes down, it doesn't matter if you're teaching tiddlywinks, you're going to be impacted by the fact that the school is going down. On the practice side, 50% observations, performance and practice. The state model is based on the work of a woman called Charlotte Danielson, and the reason they picked her is because she has these practice indicators in 4 domains. They merged them with the Connecticut Common Core of Teaching domains to create something called the Connecticut Framework. The bottom line is Danielson has reliably rated scoring videos that we can train evaluators to use. So you go through the training, you get a proficiency, you watch a teacher, you're going to score in a certain way. They have data to suggest that if you've been through the training and you've been proficient, you're going to score it about the same way. Those two things come together and you get your rating. And the process, every teacher is going to have a goal setting and planning conference. They must be trained and oriented. They go through the goal setting, they have their conference, observations, mid-year check-in, end of the year summative review. Just to do the math in your own mind, in the pilot year, every teacher is going to be visited 6 times for a minimum of 2 hours. 3 30-minute sessions with written feedback required. 3 informal sessions of at least 10 minutes with written or verbal feedback required. My estimate, this is just me, I think it's 10 hours of work per teacher, easy. So think of your administrators, think how many teachers you have, start running the numbers in your head. Now, this is a pilot year. There is a study of the pilot underway. One of the findings of the study might be, that's impossible. You can't do that many. It's too much time. They may adjust it, but right now, that's the way it goes. This piece right here, this is statute. The legislature would have to reconvene, change the law for this to change. This is not going to change. Here's the way the ratings work, and this will be the same for both teachers and administrators. So you see the outcome indicators and the practice indicators. You see how it's not perfectly symmetrical because the system is weighted a little bit toward outcome. So if you're getting great scores by your kids, but your principal doesn't think you're doing such a great job when they observe you, they're going to give the score the benefit of the doubt because that's what's driving the measurement. You can see, gather further information, gather further information. You either get a horrible, if you got a horrible outcome, but your principal gave you a stellar observation, that's telling the system that there's something wrong. Somebody needs to go in and check on that because that shouldn't happen. And vice versa. You're getting horrible observations, but your kids are doing great, something's wrong, we need more data. The state has committed in the pilot year that they are going to audit 10% of any teacher rated below standard or exemplary using an external validator just to make sure that the system is working the way they want it to.
So this is all going back to how many people at the state that are going through all these? I mean, have they hired people that are
Well,
trained in this, that are, I mean, there's got to be new
Oh, no.
positions created? or-
you're doing
I
this.
think we're gonna do it.
It's all
You're
going
doing
back
this.
to us?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're doing this. Right now, the state's invested $2.8 million to get the pilot off the ground. So people at the rest, like myself, are being trained to train district people. The pilot districts are already being trained. They've already started. And the state is supporting those pilot districts.
What are the pilot districts?
The ones that you recognize locally, Don, Litchfield and Region 6 are in a consortium. In the whole Education Connection region, those are the only two in our service area. But there's Norwalk, Bridgeport, Wilton, and basically they got 2 large urbans, a swath of suburban, and then there are like 6 tiny ones, like, you know, Eastford, Botsford, Litchfield, Region 6. And Litchfield, Region 6 are going through it together. They count as one in a pilot of 10. We're training them together, but obviously it's 2 districts. But to give you a sense of the scale, so Bridgeport had 90 administrators trained. Litchfield Region 6 combined had 15. It's just a matter of scale. Other questions? Yeah, did you have your hand up? Reconsider.
When you said someone's gonna come in and look at this for the below standard and for the exemplary.
Yes.
Who's the someone? And I think you might have just answered. that.
Yeah, I mean, the state is going to provide those external validators for the pilot districts. Some of the scale-up thinking, I think, is still a little fuzzy.
Who's doing the teacher training in the pilots?
Well, basically what happens is that we are training administrators on how to do it. We are then doing an orientation training for the teachers that's independent, separate from their evaluators. But then it is the administrators, the evaluator's responsibility in the district to provide teachers with whatever support they need beyond that orientation training that'll be part of the pilot. Each pilot district does get a bank of like technical assistance days for additional training. That's really part of the pilot. Not sure whether that'll be available after that or not.
So so we got pilots now,
Yep.
so we're not in a pilot.
Right.
How do we get trained?
Well, I mean, the Education Connection this year is running we're calling it a teacher evaluation consortium. And basically, during this year, all of you have to come up with what model you're going to use next year. And you could say, we're going to use this model. That's the state model. That's the one that most of the pilot districts are using. So we're going to do that. At the Education Connection, we are going to have a monthly, day-long meeting for people that want to learn about the pilot model and not train people officially, but go in depth so you know what's in it and empower superintendents to make decisions about whether the state model works for them or how they want to vary it. And hopefully through that process, we'll develop sort of like an Education Connection regional model that everyone has contributed to, and then you can decide at the local level whether you want to use the state model as is, the regional model as we designed it, some third variation. It'll be completely up to you. Now, the thing is up to you, but there are 50 pages of state guidelines about what it has to do. So that graph I put up there, the 50%, the 45, 5, 40, 10, you can't vary from that. And if you have something that's way different, you have to get it approved before you can use it. So you do have discretion, but you don't have complete discretion. Phil?
Of the pilot districts, how many have an approved evaluation system different from seed? And which one, Bridgeport?
No. The only pilot district that's not doing that is Branford.
And that's based on the work that they've done prior?
Yes, but it's, I honestly don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing.
Because,
They have to,
right,
for example, CEA. The CEA has a model. I know for a fact it's out of compliance with the guidelines. So,
I was
you know,
going to say New Haven is the one that
right.
does
But-
not align with this at the present time.
This was based on it. The commissioner's office is in love with New Haven. And I would say inspired by. Yeah.
So Jonathan, what the team and the seed,
Yep.
how do, what's the process for teachers getting engaged with them?
Well, team is only for beginning teachers, and that process really replaced BEST, and there's a structure for that. That's been underway. That's really not new. It's new in the fact that it's different from that in that time period, but you know, your superintendents could talk to you about what they do. You have new teachers, beginning teachers have mentors. They have to write papers. And,
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that's that. Okay. All right. Again, the curriculum we talked about. We now have multi-state unified standards, not state frameworks. We go from the pencil paper and performance tasks to digital with performance tasks. George, this is what you were talking about before. The N is half of what it was under No Child Left Behind. So this may involve some of you. You know, subgroup measurement was for special classifications of students that have been traditionally underserved. Children of color, free and reduced lunch, English language learners, special education. And in the old regs, you needed to have at least 40 children in one of those classes to have that subgroup measured and reported on. That number is now 20. So you could be, you know, your general population could be 88 if you didn't count anyone else. But if you're not making subgroup progress, that is going to impact that SPI and that DPI over time. Again, the Common Core is going to be the focus of instruction. And, you know, this stuff, believe it or not, I don't know where you are in the child development curve, but right now there are pre-K standards. You know, I know when I was in kindergarten, K was learn to hold the big red pencil, you know? Don't run with scissors. Stand in line. It was socialization to be ready to start academic learning in first grade. You can forget that. K is an academic year. Children need to be reading by the end of K. If you have a half-day K program, your kids start first grade a half a year behind. It's the way it is. This is why universal pre-K is in the debate stage. Right now, pre-K is for disadvantaged children, but if you don't have an academic K that's robust, your kids start first grade behind. It's just the state of affairs. And I think there's a very interesting philosophical discussion that goes on about, well, what about playing in the mud? And I want to ride my bike and get bit by a tick. I mean, you know, all that stuff is out there, but this is the path that we're on. In order to get from there to the end of this, that's what you got. I'm going to just give you a couple of wrap-up things, but this is the general state of affairs. A deepening commitment to standards, testing, accountability, and data. And there we go. Bill?
This is one of your, just your personal belief. How many districts truly will have the capacity to begin this next year? Well, begin it now, to implement this kind of standard next year?
Well, all of it? All of it? Nobody. I mean,
How about the teacher
How about just
evaluation?
even the teacher evaluation?
well, there is a glass half full and a glass half empty answer to that question. And I will tell you that on July 3rd, we are intimately involved in the support of the pilot districts. And, you know, just to give you a sense of this, the Common Core of Teaching, which is the framework by which we have traditionally in Connecticut talked about what good teaching looked like. That was a document that was 5 years in the development process. We're going to have meetings, we're all going to talk about it, we're going to get feedback, we're going to give and take, we're going to board. 5 years. This law was passed in May. The state board approved it on June 27th, the guidelines. This model was delivered to us 3 weeks later. Now, it's all based on work that was out there. It just put together. I'll be the first to admit, on July 3rd, I was at the orientation meeting for the pilot districts. I knew the work that had to be done. We had a Gantt chart for, you know, this has to happen, this has to be trained, and these are overlapping tasks. So a task starts, and before it's done, another task is going. And if you asked me on July 3rd, I would have said, there is no way. There's no way this is going to happen. This is happening. And the teachers who have gone through it and the administrators who have gone through it so far feel pretty positive about it. And we have a commissioner and a governor who are not really well schooled at taking no for an answer, are determined that we have had too many generations of students underserved by our current system, and it's not going to go on anymore. There's a discussion among superintendents right now to lobby the powers that be to delay the implementation. And I'll tell you, from my perspective, the people who are making the decision about whether or not that'll happen are in over my dead body mode right now. They are going, we got our foot on the gas and we are going. We'll help you, we're going to work with you, but my sense of it is it's going to happen. And they are willing to deal with implementation issues over endless debate and hand-wringing over whether it's going to work or not.
But Education Connection has a plan, initial plan for us, for the rest of us, non-pilot districts, to begin that process already. Right?
We do. First meeting is September 10th.
The technology piece of this for the CBAC worries me that the hardware and the wiring and the infrastructure aren't there in most schools. And
Well,
so
yeah.
is that been talked about at all?
It has, but the reality of it is that the hardware, this is not going to be an online assessment the way most people think about online assessments. Because it is adaptive, everyone does not have to take the test at the same time. You're going to have a 6-week window, and they can take the test anytime. And there's not going to be any embargoing. Remember, you get the boxes, you seal them up, it doesn't matter. Take the 6th grade in, you let them sit there, and it's a much more efficient test. You're talking about 60 to 90 minutes for everything. So, if they already have
Because I'm thinking 4 or 5 hours, or 6 hours.
Yeah, it's not. It's much shorter. It's a much more efficient process. And we did inventory. There were inventories done this spring.
Yeah.
I think 9 out of 10 are already there. Because it's not really a big deal. There was a lot of talk about Apple iPads not being secure. Apple saw the writing on the wall. And no one will ever admit this, but there's a quid pro quo, I think, at work. They're going to meet the security requirements so you can use a 9.5-inch iPad on the test in 2014, and then tablets are required the next year. I wonder how that happens. So, we'll see. If you go back to those 8 years, and you go through the 116 pages that is House Bill 12-116, those are the requirements of the new law as broken out in those 8 systems. And I can get Judy a copy of this, but I'm just giving you a sense that there's a mandate for everybody. It doesn't matter what part of the school business you're in. There's something for you. Unified Chart of Accounts, they are big on eventually comparing costs from district to district. They want to show apples to apples comparison. There was originally language in the legislation that if you were high, twice the district per pupil average, you're going to lose ECS money. Everyone in this room is in jeopardy on that one. And they changed it from it's going to happen to they're going to study it, but all that language is still in there. So that's that, but I want you to think about this for a minute. Remember back to this. Because if you think about what a kid needs, now, forget about what you have to do. Think about what you should do. If you were to brainstorm around your board table, what are all the skills and attributes a kid needs to be successful in life, learning, and work in the 21st century? What would you come up with? And I've had this discussion. I've had discussion with some of you. I was in Bar Campsite. I know I did this. So, what would you put on that list? How would you describe what's in that circle? And do you think it's a good one? Quick, what do you think? Hard to get a picture, isn't it? What is it? Anybody know what it is? If you just look at that, you miss the picture. And I'm telling you, if you just look at that, you miss the picture. There's no denying that there is stuff in the Common Core that matters. But in the great overlap, and I implanted school and test instead of learning because I wanted to be gracious. But if you think of what is measured there and how it's measured, it catches a piece of the overlap, but it's a piece of it. Layer on top of that 21st century skills, for example, which you have to do at Northwest Regional for NEAC accreditation anyway. These things are in every single one of those 3 domains, all the time. So if you get so fixated on that one little thing, you're going to miss it. I beg you, when you're talking about student learning and you're dealing with these SPIs and these DPIs and these IPIs, remember, all you're looking at is the nose and the puppy. There's a whole puppy behind the nose you got to be talking about too. Because if you don't see this together, you will miss the point of what you're doing. If you take the red, which is CSDE, the 1216, you take the green, which is your requirement for NEASC, and take the blue, what I would do in every area if I wanted to make sure that kids were well-versed in 21st century skills, using digital tools, and being ready for life in the 21st century. That is your plate. Good luck with that. Yeah. I mean, here's the good news though. Embedded in all of this, and now I'm wading way into editorial, okay? The last 2 minutes are just me. Forget the state. Embedded in this are a few key things. And this is true in every system of work. If you take the whole range of stuff, if you can do a couple of key things well, most of the rest of it takes care of itself. So if you look at those gears and all that stuff, if you can be really clear on Common Core state standards and 21st century skills, you can look for, support, and observe for rigorous, higher order thinking and engagement in every classroom. And you use the data you collect to do that more effectively over time. I believe you can connect all of these dots, and all your numbers are going to go up, and your kids are going to be ready for life after school. This is the fundamental board challenge in this era, to see through the maze to what really matters, pick a couple of things, do them well, and make sure that the way you communicate to parents and build curriculum, the evaluation structure, whatever you build next year as your evaluation model, if it doesn't look for both of those things and for that, you've blown it. Because this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, if you look at it positively, to really drill in a system of accountability that measures the things that you want. Do it poorly, you measure the wrong stuff and you get the wrong results every time. If you can do these three things well and connect the other systems to it, you are going to be fine. And really, it's about taking Connecticut reform, the national standards, and NEASC, and combine them into a focused process that just connects those three dots. And you will be successful as a board and as an organization if you do it.
I just wanted to just say one thing. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Judy Palmer, the superintendent here at Region 7. And you did such a great job with that, Jonathan, and thank you so much. But it's one thing that I would like to stress. There's so much, obviously, for all of us to consider here. But the one thing that I think we need to really think about as boards of education and superintendents is the support that we need to offer to our teachers. The teachers, I mean, they are the core of everything we do. We can do this. We can do it well. We have to work with the teachers. We have to really concentrate on the support that comes from the boards right on down to the classroom. That's how we're going to succeed at this. We will do it, and we will do it well.
Yeah, I mean, teachers are going to feel, if you do this wrong, completely under assault. Just completely under assault. If you look at it as an opportunity, you know, guess what? Accountability is here to stay. There's no getting around it. You've got to make your peace with the fact that you're going to get measured and you're going to get observed. And if you're not comfortable with that, public ed is not the place for you. Because no town is going to give you $70,000 plus $25,000 worth of benefits and just say, go in your classroom and close the door and we don't care what you do. That era is gone. It was pre-1986. It no longer exists. Now, you've got teachers who came into the profession before '86, and they're not used to thinking that way. So that is a cultural change, but if you can embrace that and get it, and help define those behaviors that will help everybody do better, this can be a really exciting professional time. but it'll take leadership and support from just about every angle to make that happen.
And it's not often that we're all in the same room together, but I know I speak for the administrators and the staff here at Region 7 when we say we could not experience the results that we have here without the hard work and the dedication of the superintendents, Board of Education, the teachers, and the support staff in the feeding schools. So it is a group effort, we're in it together, but we're in a really good place. I would put us up against anyone in the state, and it really is important that we leave this meeting understanding that there is a lot, but we can do it, and we can do it well. Everyone in the state is going to be doing it, and hopefully we'll be leading the way.
And I know 7's got to go to a meeting. If there are people from the elementary boards that want to linger, I'd be glad to stick around and answer any other questions you have.
Nice job.
Thanks. Sure.
Well done, JPC.